Frank Gunnar Dawson had never asked for special treatment. Not in Fallujah when a roadside IED stole his right leg. Not during rehab when every step felt like fire. And not during the years that followed when the ghosts of war lingered long after the battle was over. But today, at age 72, cane in hand and prosthetic leg aching in the heat, he found himself needing something he never wanted: a little consideration. Thrilltopia loomed large ahead of them, all steel tracks and cheerful screams, a kaleidoscope of color and adrenaline. It was the biggest amusement park in the state, maybe the country, a monument to joy, excitement, and lines long enough to make a saint swear. His grandson, Timmy, was practically vibrating beside him. 8 years old, decked out in a Thrilltopia t-shirt 2 sizes too big, ball cap slung backward, and grinning like it was Christmas and his birthday rolled into one. "This is going to be so awesome, Grandpa," Timmy said, tugging his arm. Frank smiled, though pain laced through his leg. "You bet it is, kiddo. Just gotta check in at guest services first." He had done everything right. Called ahead. Asked about accommodations. The woman on the phone had been friendly, enthusiastic even. "Of course we honor VA disability documentation," she'd said. "Just show your ID at guest services and we'll get you sorted." So Frank had come prepared. Clean-shaven, proud in his old 3rd Battalion cap, with his laminated VA disability identification card tucked safely in his wallet. It bore his name, photo, and proof of his 80% combat-connected disability. It had opened doors at government buildings, airports, and even Disneyland. Surely it would do here. Guest services was marked by a bright yellow awning, already baking under the morning sun. Inside, air conditioning hummed, and behind the counter stood a young man in a Thrilltopia polo shirt, lanyard slung with the authority of someone who took his summer job very, very seriously. His name tag read, Brad. "Morning," Frank began, with the polite formality of a man raised on yes, sir, and no, ma'am. "I'm here for the disability accommodation. Called ahead, was told my VA card would do." He slid the ID across the counter. Brad barely looked at it. He blinked, held it between 2 fingers like it might be sticky, then squinted at the laminated surface. Yeah, this doesn't look official." Frank's brows drew together. "It's issued by the Department of Veterans Affairs. Federal. Should be more than enough." Brad flipped it over, then back again. "Yeah, but it's not a Thrilltopia-specific accommodation pass. It doesn't say anything about amusement parks." "That's not how this works," Frank said, careful not to let the old Marine in him rise. "It's ADA-compliant documentation. Your website says—" Brad cut him off with a little smirk. "Sir, we get a lot of these homemade cards. If you want accommodations, you'll need our form. Has to be signed by a doctor, dated within the last 6 months. Otherwise, you can wait in line like everyone else." Frank's jaw tightened. Behind him, Timmy had stopped bouncing. His hand clutched Frank's pant leg. "But, Grandpa," he whispered, "I thought they said—" "They did," Frank said quietly, placing a steadying hand on the boy's shoulder. He turned back to Brad. "Son, I don't care if I have to crawl onto those rides, but don't you tell me this card is fake." Brad shrugged. "Rules are rules. I don't make 'em, sir." Frank stood there a moment longer, then slowly took his ID back. The tremble in his hand wasn't age, it was fury being forced to sit quietly. He nodded once, turned, and led Timmy out of the building. They sat on a bench just beyond the turnstiles. Inside, roller coasters clattered and screams rose like thunder. Park music chirped out of speakers in cheerful loops. Frank sat stiffly, his knee burning, watching his grandson's face crumple. "I was really excited," Timmy whispered. "I know, buddy." Frank swallowed hard. "Me too." He pulled out his phone, scrolled through a short list of names that dated back to another life. One stood out: Vance, Rebecca, Senate. He hesitated. He wasn't one to pull favors. But today felt different. He tapped call. It rang twice. "Frank?" came the crisp voice on the other end. "Senator Vance," he said, voice low. "Sorry to call like this, but I've got a situation." He laid it out fast. The promise of accommodations, the VA card, the smug kid at the counter, Timmy's face. There was a pause. Then, "Stay where you are." The call ended. Frank didn't know what to expect. Maybe a follow-up call, maybe nothing. But 5 minutes later, the music cut off. Like a record scratch in a movie, the cheerful jingle just stopped. And then, the park-wide PA system crackled to life. "Attention, Thrilltopia guests and staff," came a voice, calm, commanding, deadly serious. "This is Senator Rebecca Vance," all across the park. Families looked up. Staff froze mid-scoop of popcorn. Ride operators lifted their heads. Frank blinked. Brad, back at guest services, went pale. "I have just been informed that a decorated United States Marine, Frank Dawson, retired, was denied legally mandated disability accommodations at your park. Not because of safety, not because of capacity, but because a young employee decided a federal ID looked fake." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Thrilltopia, let me be clear. You do not get to override federal law with amusement park red tape. This is not just about one man. It is about every veteran, every disabled guest, and every promise this country makes to those who serve." The silence that followed was crushing. Then, "Effective immediately, this park is shut down. Pending full investigation and ADA compliance audit, rides will cease. Ticket sales will stop. This will be a very public reminder that disrespecting our veterans has consequences." Within seconds, the park changed. Rides slowed to a stop. Queues began to thin. Staff looked around in panic. A black SUV convoy rolled through the gates. Out stepped Senator Rebecca Vance in navy slacks and a white blouse, flanked by aides and 2 ADA enforcement officials. She walked with purpose, eyes locked on Frank. "Gunner," she greeted, taking his hand. "Heard you were trying to give your grandson a day to remember." Frank gave her a look. "Didn't mean to start a war over it." "Well," she said, glancing at the frozen rides, "you brought the thunder anyway." Brad was gone within the hour. Security escorted him off the premises as cameras arrived. The park manager, Mr. Peters, sweaty and suddenly humble, apologized 6 different ways before Vance even looked in his direction. And then, with the weight of state authority behind her, Senator Vance turned the day around. Frank and Timmy were escorted through the now empty park. Rides whirred to life, just for them. Ice cream, front row on the coasters, even a custom plushie from the gift shop with #1 Grandpa stitched into its side. That night, Thrilltopia issued a public apology. They announced a complete overhaul of their disability policies, mandatory staff retraining, and, most notably, lifetime VIP passes for Frank and Timmy. But Frank barely glanced at the golden card when they handed it to him. What mattered most? Timmy's laughter on the log flume, the look in Brad's eyes when Senator Vance said, "You're done here." And knowing that, for once, the system hadn't failed him. "Sometimes," Frank would later tell a fellow vet over coffee, "you don't have to fight every battle, but when the battle finds you, you stand." Because dignity doesn't come from a laminated card. It comes from refusing to let anyone forget what it cost to earn it.